All right, welcome to this week's episode of Kuden Radio, right? All right, so Dai-Shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Most of you know that. You're my regular followers. James is in the wings, as usual. So, as most of you who are my students and who are on regularly know, I haven't stopped training. I haven't stopped studying. I've got all my little side projects and whatnot. So I was at it again, and I was rereading the book Hidden Lineage by Sean Askew. And, I didn't get very far into it when I ended up having to take like a fork in the road kind of thing. But I came across a reference that stopped me, right? So have you ever read something and you read it and it made sense, or your brain filed it away one way, and then you go back and you read it again, or you happen to see it again, and it just clicks differently. Okay, maybe it's just me, but so I'm familiar with a lot of different words that were used for ninja, right? I mean, the word ninja itself is fairly new. Shi-No-Bi was older than that, but again, in a timeline of things, ninja's pretty new. So there are all these other words, kusa and kan and supa, things like that, right? But I stopped by this word or a term. Again, I've seen it before, right? I remember seeing it in my earlier studies, going through the Bansen Shukai, right? But this time, like it clicked in a completely different way. Right? I remember before just thinking, "Oh, that's interesting." Okay, a little play on words. But what I ran into was it's a term for, well, it's not term for. It is the term Shi-No-Bi. Right? We're all familiar with that, right? Shi-No-Bi. It's the alternate translation or pronunciation for the nin kanji that we're all used to seeing, right? The one for to endure, to persevere, those kind of things, right? Shinobu is the alternate reading, but again, when I hit it, it wasn't the usual single character. As a matter of fact, the character that we're used to seeing in Ninjutsu, ninja, right? This kanji, the blade over the heart kind of thing, right? It's not even in it. Right? This one was different, right? It's older, right? And it's written with 3 characters, still pronounced, still read Shi-No-Bi, right? But each kanji, right? Shi-No-Bi. So as opposed to a singular one with a what we might call a conjugation ending. If you're seeing, if you're looking at Chinese writing, Trinity knows what I'm talking about. If you're looking at Chinese writing, all you see are kanji, right? But if you look at Japanese, right, because the kanji are borrowed from the Chinese, after certain kanji or at the end of a sentence or whatever, right? If it's not next to it, it'll be in tiny font right above the kanji. These kana characters, right? Uniquely Japanese syllables to tell you how to pronounce it. But if it's right next to it, right? If it's right, or if you're reading top to bottom, it'll be under it, right? You'll see kanji kana. That conjugates it. If you don't worry about it, if you want a language major, conjugation means that you're going to adjust it for context, right? So since Japanese is a verb-based or an action-based language, to turn a verb into a noun, a person, place, or thing, right? You need this little conjugation thing, right? So uh, to take the nin kanji that we're used to seeing from the verb, right, to endure, or to, whatever, right? We have to modify that so it becomes one who endures, or it turns into endurance, right? It's very different, right? But anyway, this is over, right? So we're looking at Shi-No-Bi, right? Three kanji, Shi-No-Bi, right? And so I read past it, and I was doing my thing, but my brain just kept getting sucked back to this thing, right? And the more I sat with it, the more I realized that this isn't just a word, right? Maybe I've just been tainted too much by since over the years. But what I saw was a formula. What I saw was something that to me, it's the DNA of what it means to walk this path. Right? Almost, you can almost say it's the hidden alchemy of the ninja itself. I saw it as the process by which we get to the nin symbol that everybody's used to for endurance, perseverance, patience, those kind of things, right? So one is an outcome, right? This singular kanji. But these three, and actually, I'll talk about it a little bit more here in a bit. But this term was actually used by a prince way back in the day, Shotoku, who used information gatherers. Right, this was a name that he gave them. But what was interesting is that this name, which is supposed to imply people with skills who are going to go and do this thing, right? They're going to bring back information and things like that for me. The kanji, the words that are put together here to make this term, they don't literally say that. It points to something very, very different, right? So that being said, right, in today's episode, we're going to go down that rabbit hole, right? I'm going to lead you down my little place there. You don't even have to drink the elixir or eat the cookies or whatever that Alice did. You can just kind of follow along, right? But what I want to do is I want to explore what Shi-No-Bi means, not as a romantic title, right, but as a living formula for transformation, for mastery, right, and for turning our defeats into fuel for growth. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and by the way, if things kind of pause or get a little wonky or whatever as we go, I just got a new laptop, and so things may glitch along. I'm hoping not, but I'm still getting used to it. So, all right. Anyway, I'll see you when we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to Kuden Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
Man, we're still using that story, huh, James? Anyway, so who do we have? Who's on? Let's do our highs and hays and all that kind of stuff before I jump into things. See, James just pops up. Bing! He prefers this little window, right? Every time I pick the wrong thing or it defaults to like this split screen, big picture kind of thing. If you've ever been on when that's popped up, very quickly he scrambles to like do his little window. Anyway, who's on?
So far, it looks like Terrence, Kyle, and Jared have checked in.
Awesome. All right.
There was some static on your mic, but you could still hear you, but it was like static in the background, but it suddenly seems to have cleared up.
Was that you mean when I was doing the pre-intro monologue? Was it then?
Yeah, like your voice was coming through, you could hear it, but it had like a static in the background just when you were talking.
That's really weird because there's
And then
no sound in my office.
Jared
Uh-oh.
or Kyle apparently heard it, but it literally just like all of a sudden just cleared up. No, it's clear.
Weird. Perhaps there are ghosts in here. I have an old Victorian home, and we bought it as a fixer-upper. The oldest record that we can find for when the house may have been built somewhere around 1840. So who knows? My grandson said there's 3 ghosts that live in the house, and he doesn't have any names, but he interacts with them on a regular basis. So he even describes the shapes and whatever that they show up in. So no idea, right? Maybe something's trying to compete for voice time. Who knows? Anyway, all right. Sorry about that, guys. We'll try to keep things straight. But again, I'm using a new laptop. I guess I could have used the old one since I don't need to use the keyboard. The keyboard is just absolutely wonky. But I'm going through growing pains. I just fired it up yesterday, so well, we'll see what happens. And this one doesn't have the same kind of connections for me, so I can't use the standard USB kind of plug-in thing. So I have to go hunting for a hub or some kind of special adapter so that I can plug my regular mic and another light that I have and other things in my camera into the computer, because this one only has USB-C connections. So anyway, not that you need to know the techie stuff. So hopefully everything comes out okay as we go. Although we were just talking just before we went live, James was saying that he's seen people in the area complaining about the local service provider that I use, high-speed stuff. They're complaining that there's things are slowing down and there's little glitches here or there. So hopefully we don't have one of those glitches that change things for us. But anyway. All right, so that's it. I mean, I see the numbers popping up and all that, but
Maury just checked in, said good evening.
well, it's about time. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Relax. Don't hop on a plane and come over here and try to kill me. All right, so let me bring up my notes here. We're going to just dive into this, and yeah, we'll go from there. So don't forget, well, I'm getting my notes here all set. Don't forget, the countdown has started, right? We now are officially, now 4 days and change from the beginning of, or from the start of this year's fall camp. I just went back and edited my graphics. This is our 34th annual fall camp. I'm old. Oh man, 34. Jeez. And that was accounting for not having one during COVID and just stuff. So anyway, 34. Holy shit. Anyway.
So the mic is starting up a little bit again.
What's that?
The mic is starting that static a little bit again. Just FYI.
I don't know how to fix it.
It just randomly started back up.
Let me see if there's a setting here that I can adjust. Microphone. Now it's on. Access. This is good. Let's see if there's a setting that I can shift. That's everybody needs to hear the podcast, right? Let's do techie stuff. Yeah, I don't see anything. That. Why am I asking you? You can't even see my screen. It's always a learning curve with technology. Well, this is as good as we get, guys. I apologize. For the next one, I'll have all this other technology in place. But anyway, all right. So, okay. We good otherwise, James? We good? Yeah.
Yeah, other than that, we're good.
Okay, all right. So, before the word ninja was ever written with a single character, right? Again, we talked about this if you were on early enough. If not, don't worry about it. Everybody's used to seeing that kanji, right? It has the kanji for, a lot of people say to, but it's actually kisaki, right? Over kokoro, shin kokoro, right? The heart, right? Blade over the heart. To is blade, but there's an extra hash mark in it that points to the kisaki, the edge of the blade, the most dangerous part, right? Anyway, so we understand that means to endure, to persevere, to be patient, right? Long before that, there were lots of names, lots of terms. A lot of these I found during my historical research. I was first introduced to them decades ago when I did a little bit of training with Tanamura-san, who founded the Genbukan. Right? I was not. I mean, I was obviously in Bujinkan, but all the cons had the same kind of information, and they all branched off from Sensan Takamatsu as well. Or anyway, so, but I was introduced to a bunch of these names. Again, the ones that stand out for me, Rupa, Supa, they're different. Rapa, sorry, not Rupa. Rapa, Supa, Kan. Kan is a gap, and it was given, or it was a way of referencing these spies, these information gatherers, right? So what it implied was because everything was made of wood and paper, and nothing ever lined up after it got weathered a little bit. That the ninja, right, the information gatherer, would peer through. They would either find a gap or they would create one. Right, one of the reasons for kunai and these ningu, special infiltration tools, right, kind of cut a little slit in the shoji paper, right, and then be able to peer through. So they, but it also broadened out and implied gaps in security, gaps in someone's cautiousness, right? In the Navy, there's a saying, loose lips sink ships, that kind of thing. Came out of World War II, I think. I don't know. The whole idea had to do with, like, don't divulge information, even locations, right? So, kusha is a type of grass, right? Grows plentifully on Togashi and that mountain range right there. As a matter of fact, in the museum on Togashi, if you ever go with me on a trip to Japan, unless you opt out of the side trips, we will go to that museum, which has all these historical pieces from that region, right? Armor, all kinds of things, and a lot of this stuff is actually woven and made out of this kusha grass, right? And the whole idea was, kind of like the snake in the grass kind of implication, because it would grow really, really high, and then the ninja could move through this stuff and do that kind of thing. There were tons of names. So, but they weren't just all just kind of thrown out there, right? There's actually, I think it's in hidden tradition in Sean's book. A lot of these names are listed, and then he has them laid out where they were actually, certain ones were popular in certain geographical areas, right? They were more used, and I think that may have to do with the specialization of the groups that worked in each of those areas. So they would have been given names that kind of match that. Anyway, so we're going way, way back, right? There was one of the first recorded references of using information gatherers and a group or a clan that was run by, again, I'm not going to jump on these names, but this person was really, really good at gathering information and stuff like that, right? So this Prince Shikoku called this group of information gatherers Shi-No-Bi. Okay? But it was written out with very, very different kanji, right? The only one that has anything close to what we're used to seeing is the first one for the syllable shi, right? And so it still has the heart. It still has the shin kokoro, that little smiley face. Some of my students are like, well, it looks like a smiley face. Little bowl with teardrops or whatever down below. It's the only one. But this kanji, shi, means will. It means intent or aspiration. It can mean ambition. It can also mean like passion, like the fire of intent, okay? And that kind of thing, right? The syllable no, right? Most people are used to seeing that in the middle of like kata names, kamai names, ichimoji no kamai, right? Sanshi no kata, right? In that case, it's a connector kind of thing. It's not directly translated. There's an implication to it because of what it is. But in this case, no, this is a very complex kanji, and it means ability, capability, skill, implies like ability or cultivated skill, right? Yeah. So, and then this B, right? Shi-No-Bi. Sometimes the kanji is swapped out. You might see it a different way in some of these historical books, but the way we're going to use it now is as I have it from Bansachukai, as Sean reproduced it as this prince had written it out as he used it. Right? So again, another complex kanji. It means to prepare, to be equipped, to provide or attend, right? So the meaning here is a state of readiness, preparation, right? The courage to be equipped to handle things when the moment comes. That kind of idea, right? So this wasn't just a name, okay? This was a formula, okay? It's a path of transformation, right? And we'll talk about this toward the end. We'll come full circle and whatnot, but the path of the ninja, right? As I was introduced to it, and as I've been taught through the years, Sensei, Hatsumi Sensei, the ones that didn't drift over to just a flat out Budo Taijutsu kind of thing, that there was always this core element, right? This core microcosm, macrocosm, right? So the big picture and this underlying principle driving everything, right? This is the process of becoming, not just becoming anything, becoming through testing, through persistence, and as we're going to discuss in this episode, through failure. Okay, I think we've done episodes in the past where I've talked about the concept of failing forward, right? But especially for those of us who live in the West, Western academics make the idea of failure very attractive, and so people tend to naturally avoid it anyway. It's an ego-based kind of thing because it somehow makes us look bad, right? And we can't have that facade drop. But Western academic school doesn't help either, right? But again, there's this testing, failure, that kind of thing, right? And if you look at some of the founders of just a couple of the arts that we train in today in the Budokan, Shinkan, Gembukan, you'll see this formula playing out again and again. Okay, great men who lost, or who were humbled, or who were rejected. Right, a couple of examples that we're going to go through from three of our lineages. As a matter of fact, when I take folks to Japan, again, there literally was a dojo, a training center near. If you've ever been to Japan and you've taken the path of Tobakushi, right? That there are actually 5 shrines. 2 were minor, but the 3 primary shrines up through this path. Quite the walk, quite the hike. Takes you past a really old warrior cemetery. The tombstones and whatnot have the ones that aren't like just, I don't know, sandblasted blank because of time and weather. Have the crests for these different families and whatnot. It's still in use today. Right? But when we do that, right, we go to the Ofuso, right? That's the very, very top shrine. It's actually the one that the myth of Tobakure was actually born from, right? Where the sun goddess or the sun god Amaterasu, right, supposedly created the Japanese islands and all that kind of stuff, right? It's the same kind of, human beings are sinning, I'm going to punish them kind of thing that runs through all religions, right? In this case, she decided to hide her light away from the world, so she hid herself in a cave, slid this big old heavy rock across, right? And through the world of darkness. Well, there was this warrior from Tobacco, right? That used deception to get her to come back out. Right? So it's huge myth that goes into this whole thing, all centered around this ability, right, to know and use weaknesses and make things happen. But anyway, near the Ofuso, across this mountain stream, this bridge that goes across. Now it's just a blank area where Yamabushi, the Shugendo practitioners, right, still go to and have these rituals and things, right? There used to be a dojo that stood there, and that is where Daisuke Nishina, the founder or the named founder of the Tobacco Review, trained when he was very young, and he was a Shugendo student, so he was learning all of this stuff, right? This empowerment through trial, right? Very interesting stuff. But they everything very, very together, right? But one of the things I have to remind students, I take them to this site. One of the things I remind students is that these people that you fantasize about, or that you got them on a list, and grandmasters and whatnot, they weren't always such. Okay, and they didn't always succeed, but somehow, through again failure, right, almost died, being humiliated, being in a subclass in ancient Japan, subcaste where you're a reject from society, and somehow, right, they used those moments, those defining moments, right, to become the masters that we revere today. Right, Hatsumi Sensei has more than one story, but I'm going to pull one from him. Takamatsu, same thing. Right? I have my own. So today we're going to look at this formula in action. Okay, and we're going to match that up with a few of these stories. Okay, to see how you, me. I've been using this stuff for decades, but how we can use it to turn our own setbacks, our own doubts, right? Whatever it is that we think is the reason for, right? Into fuel for mastery. But here's my disclaimer, right? As always, just as it was for them, right? These past masters, right? The choice is yours. It's each and every one of us, right? At every turn, right? There's always this defining moment. Right? I'll mention this later on as well, but a bunch of episodes back, right? I covered the hero's journey, and there were these stages, right? Every fictional story across cultures, every master, every expert has gone through these things, right? Every stage, right? There's the call, and then there's the journey, and then these kind of things, right? These defining moments. But it's not that these things happen; it's what we do when they happen. Anyway, that being said, if you get value out of this episode, like all of them, right? Do us a favor, right? It really helps us out. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification, whatever platform you happen to be on. Helps us out, helps you out, because the algorithms will keep notifying you of things faster and more easily, but it also helps to get this stuff out to other folks that are looking for information like this. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, does anybody else sign in before I dive into the first story?
No, nothing else.
Sound still doing okay?
It's like it was. It's still really. Whenever you talk, there's like static in the background, and it cuts out, and then like it comes back. You just sound like you're sped up for a few words, and then
I wonder if it's the speed of the internet. I don't know. All right. Well, we'll just keep working through. Okay. So, first story, first past master I'm going to talk about, since I already brought him up, is Daisuke Nishina. Right? Birth given name, Daisuke Nishina. Came to be known as Daisuke Togakure, or if you say it based on Japanese naming conventions, Togakure Daisuke, right? Or Nishina Daisuke. Right? That was your last name, first name. If you're in the military, then you're used to it. Okay? But we're going to borrow the story as the exile warrior. Okay, so he was a trained warrior. Right, he was a samurai, born into a samurai family. A whole bunch of names and moving from one point to another, but anyway. So he was loyal to his lord. As a matter of fact, in Togakure Ryu, throughout history, okay, no matter what kind of crap was going on, and even though they may have assisted with this shogun or this group or whatever, the Togakure Ryu's allegiance was always with and never strayed from the emperor. Okay, we get it at a certain point. For a long period in Japanese history, the emperor was just a figurehead, right? The shogun were the ones that ran the place, right? But the point is that Daisuke was already, right, a man of rank and skill, right? But in this one battle, right, when his side lost during the Great Wars between the Genji and the Heike, everything he knew vanished overnight. Right? He became an exile, ended up being stripped of his title, his land, his purpose. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons for changing his name from Shina to Togakure wasn't just to honor his birthplace, but it was a way to disappear, right? Because they would have been hunting him down, right? A couple of things to remember historically about those times, right? If if you were on the losing side of a battle, you were expected to commit seppuku, okay? Or they would just come through or hunt you down and kill you because that's how they handled the opposition. Okay? Can't have anybody with different viewpoints running around the world. Kind of sounds familiar today. But so and as an honorable samurai, he would have, except that prior to the battle, his lord, right, asked him, or didn't ask him, charged him with, should you survive this, please make sure my family stays safe. And he agreed. So that kind of superseded everything, right? So anyway, ran off into the mountains and did share some of his training, both Shugendo and martial training, with the people from that region. But also, there's this whole story of him meeting this this warrior monk who himself was in exile from China. Right? Man, all kinds of shit going on, right? So again, most people during that time would have withered, right? They would have blamed fate. They would have cursed their enemies. They would have said it was the will of the gods. Who knows, right? Sunk into bitterness. Look at the way human beings operate today. Pretty much the same, okay? Except that the culture would have imposed even more, okay? But SK chose differently, okay? His will and intent, okay, refused to die. He chose this other path, right, to survive. And again, not a whole lot of written documentation for ninja families. A lot of this stuff is oral tradition and whatnot. So I've this story in a couple of different ways. We'll just kind of trim the fat and whatnot. But again, took this path, right? So not an easy one, because he moved away from a life of luxury, relatively speaking. I know we would compare it differently, but yeah, no. If you ever get a chance to go, if you have not already, and you go to the mountains of Iga, or you go to the mountain range where Togakushi happens to be, Togakure, modern thing is Togakushi, northwest of Nagano. I give you that reference point because the Winter Olympics were held there once. Because of the mountains. These mountains look like something out of a freaking cartoon. I mean, they go almost straight up and they're very slim and cone-like, right? Heavily wooded, forested and whatnot. It just they're not what a lot of us in the West are used to seeing as far as mountains go. But anyway, so he's living in this hostile region, right? And again encounters this mysterious monk, this warrior named Kaindoshi, and that meeting changed everything. Right? He was introduced to everything from different ways to fighting to entirely different mindsets, different ways of thinking about things, esoteric teachings, different perspectives, all that, right? And well, the rest is history, right? Daisuke's defeat became his awakening, right? It was the birth of the Togakure, right? The foundation of what we now call Ninjutsu. And the more and more a lot of these historians in the art are ferreting this stuff out, we're actually finding that the Togakure school isn't just a more robust or the most robust school of Ninjutsu, having all of these sub-arts in it. But Togakushi is not near Iga and Koga. Okay? Bunch of moving around and things, right? But based on roots in Shugendo and a bunch of these other things, right? To Aoshi, it looks like it was probably the birthplace of what we today call Ninjutsu, right? But I think about this, right? Um, this art began not in victory, but in a major loss in a battle, right? The Lord was killed, right? Daisuke's father was killed in this battle. A bunch of his friends. He was wounded, right? So, yeah, not victory. Started in exile. Okay? So, I don't know. What if your lowest moment isn't punishment, but an invitation? Right? What if whatever it is that you're going through, in whatever area of your life, right? Whatever your current loss is, right? Um, what if that current, we'll call it a loss, right, is what the universe uses to strip away everything else that's false, so that your real training can begin? What if it's there to shake things up, and the reason why we're going through what we're going through is because we're not prepared, we're not equipped, we don't have the capability or skills to handle this particular situation, right, easily. Right? It's going to have to be this first part, the Shi of Shi-No-Bi, our will, our intent, right? That's going to carry us through, right? I will figure this out. Right? I will solve this. Right? One of the phrases that my wife hears most often from me when a problem creeps up. Put up a certain mood, and I say, "It's okay. I'll take care of it." And whether I say it out loud or I just recognize it, it's what I do. So again, not about bell ringing. It's just not gonna curl up and die. I'm not gonna avoid it. I'm not gonna go into escape mode. Now, are there times for that? Sure. Right? He did it off the battlefield, right? Well, in those days, he'd been considered a coward, right? And that turned into outlaw. That turned into all the names that somebody could be. Somebody that has status. Can you imagine? You're a freaking samurai. Honor, code, all this stuff, right? You make a decision. Right? This is not like the world throwing shit at you. This is making a decision to become what you loathed yesterday. So that everything can change. Okay. This will, right? There's something at our core, right? I truly do believe, unless somebody just fantasizes, but they're never going to do anything anyway, right? Some people may not act because they don't know what to do. Some people aren't going to act anyway, and it's easier to play video games or dream and fantasize about being the hero, but they're just not going to break sweat. Okay, there's always a problem. One of my teachers used to say, to these people, every solution has a problem. So, but it starts with this will. It starts with recognizing that inner drive, right? That purpose, that sense of, right? I can't do good in the world if I'm not in the world, right? So to honor that Lord, to take care of his family, he's going to have to survive long enough for these people to stop freaking looking for him. Okay, and the process he tripped over himself. I'm making this up, right? Tripped over tree roots for all I know, and bumps into a teacher that just changes everything. And here we are. Okay, if we think about all of these little moments through time, if Hatsumi Sensei wouldn't have had the experience that he did right after the war with American GIs, I'll talk about that in a bit. He wouldn't have had a reason to seek out Takamasa Sensei. If Takamasa Sensei's dad and grandfather didn't make a certain decision when he was just a young child. The long and short of this is we'd all be doing Taekwondo or some other martial art. But here we are. Okay. So anyway, I tried to create programs. I tried to do things to help folks with these different stages and different steps along the way. Right. One of the things I created, Jesus Christ, James, how long has it been around? It was a life purpose discovery process in place when you started.
I don't remember if it was in place or that came in.
Or if I just created it right around there. Okay. So we have at least a reference point. How long have you been with me?
I think we figured about 2 decades now.
Oh shit! Right. Well, you're getting old too. Right. So anyway, so it's like this 5-stage program that its only purpose is to be able to give you the ability to sum up in a sentence or 3 the answer to somebody's question. Why do you make the choices that you make? Right? Okay. And this is not about goals. This is about finding that drive, right? That thing. A lot of people, if you ask them, I'm talking about life purpose. About, make sure my children are, they grow up healthy and strong, and so they're successful. They go out in the world. Okay, I appreciate that, and that's a pretty good goal. But that's not what I'm talking about with life purpose. What I'm talking about with life purpose, I described this in the program, is who's the person living the role of parent for this child or these children, choosing to make the decisions that you're making. Right? What's behind that? Right? Because some just don't want to do the hard stuff, and so the kid runs amok and whatnot, and then they look at other people that the kid just trampled on and go, "Hey, kids, what are you going to do?" And other ones, right, are what I call helicopter parents, where they micromanage everything. But what's behind that? Right? Because it's probably behind a whole lot of other decisions as well. And if we could root out that, like when I went through one of these life mastery programs, this program is actually a synthesis of a bunch of these things, both through Mikyo and some other ones in different realms that I've gone through, and it just kind of brings everything together. A couple of different exercises that culminate. Exercise number 4 is writing your own eulogy. Okay, what do you want people to say about you after you can't change their mind? That kind of thing, right? So the gist of the whole thing. I'm sorry. One of these programs I was going through, somebody in the program wanted to go into space. Okay? That sounds cool to me. Except at that point, like I was 20 something, right? This guy was already like late 50s, early 60s. right? So chances are not going into space. But through the process, figured out that like it was this adventurer. It was this drive to know the unknown and to be able to share that with other people, right? And so uh, then he was able to start exploring what other ways can I do that? What other ways can I uh, do the same thing without going into space, right? And so, whole long story in that direction. But anyway, I don't know if James has access to it or not. We'll definitely make sure it ends up in the descriptions and whatnot. But if you're interested, the light purpose discovery process is it's a cool tool, right? Really cool, and it's not something. It looks simple, but it's not something. If you do it in a single sitting or in a day or two, you took it like a Western academic assignment. So, anyway, James, you went through that a long time ago, didn't you? Like purpose discovery process.
Yes.
Yeah. So, it looks easy, but
It's not.
What's that?
But it's not.
It's not. Yeah, it's easier to look at other people and ferret things out, their positives and negatives and whatnot, than to look at our own. So, anyway, any questions? Is there anything pop up, comments, or whatever while I was going through the Daisuke Machina thing there?
Just Jimmy dropped his combo wall.
Oh, cool. Okay, so let's look at my second example. My second example, some of you guys have heard me talk about him quite often. We're going to call this guy the humiliated master. Oriyomon Takagi, founder of the Takagi Shogun. Okay. We have to remember that like people can get bits and pieces of a story, right? So he lost a fight, right? Losing a fight is one thing, but already being an accomplished master in what in his time was already considered to be a long combat tradition, right? He was like a jutsu kind of thing. He was a skilled grappler, very proud warrior, right? Ended up getting in this match with a quote unquote modern fighter for his time, right? And lost badly. As in, like during those times, one of my teachers used to describe those kind of things as if you got into a match, sounds like a contest, right? It was like racing for pink slips back in my day, right? 50s, 60s, 70s, those kind of things. You know, the street drag races and all that. Anybody old enough to know what racing for pink slips is? Right? If you lost the race, you gave your owner's papers for your car to the winner. He now owns your car. Sign it over. Okay. But you got broken or killed. And so the point is that for someone of his rank, that defeat was humiliating. Okay. I remember when I was going to be testing for my Godan. This was not something that excited me, right? Because I had long since known like the history behind these things, right? Hatsumi Sensei taking his, not knowing he was taking a test, right? Hatsumi Sensei took the Saki test with a live sword. Like he had no idea. Right? He was just told to sit in meditation. No matter what happens, stay there. Right? It wasn't until after he moved, he looked back and there was Takuma Sensei blade right where his head used to be, or was there like a second ago, right? So the Saki test was developed as a as a gateway, as an entry point. Yes, I get it, right? There's this look, I attained fifth dan. Yeah, but what's that new level about, right? Learn this from Sensei, learn by talking to a bunch of the master teachers and stuff. This is a gateway to a whole new level of training where we're going to be focusing on the intuitive and some of these abilities that in the West here we would group under like ESP. Okay, so after fifth dan, we're supposed to be using this intuitive sense, regardless of whether we can see him or not see him, but doing a whole lot more training to hone that, to be able to pick up this murderous intent, right? Saki, right? And I know it's gently phrased sometimes as the force of the killer, right? But it's murderous intent, right? And then there's a whole other transition after that, right? Where we move from the realm of Saki to Kuji, right? Where you can detect danger that has no murderous intent. Okay? An archer or a sniper, hundreds of yards or miles away, fires a bullet or shoots an arrow. You can have intent all the way over there, but we're way out of range for that. Okay? So that arrow, that bullet, there's no projected intent. Okay? All of these things are gateways to new levels of skill, right? Not for more technique accumulation, but for the development of and honing of different skills, different capabilities, right? So that we are more and more prepared and equipped to handle situations that most are not. Right? Shi-No-Bi. Right? So anyway, he lost badly, right? And again, it was humiliating, right? He could have blamed the rules. He could have blamed his opponent. He could have blamed luck, right? But instead, he asked the question that separates ego from mastery. He asked why. Why did that happen? How did that happen? Okay. And a part of this, right? And he realized that what he mastered was rooted in an older, stiffer way of fighting, involved certain types of clothing, certain types of conditions and whatnot. A lot of it, right, no longer fit the world that he was living in. Okay, and so he kind of did things in kind of like three phases, right? The first one, this whole thinking things through and trying to figure it out, right? And you'll hear that this is a common theme throughout Togakude as well. Okay? Even the shrines on Togakushi, right? There was a long period when Mikyo was introduced into Japan where the Tendai and the Shingon sects, SECTS, in case you misheard me through the static going on. I'm not talking about monks having sex. Anyway, they fought over different areas and who was going to influence and whatnot, right? There was a long period where Mikyo and even esoteric Buddhism was combined with the Shinto and all these other kind of things that were going on. So anyway, but after quite a bit of back and forth and whatnot, finally the Shingon folks left that region. Right, so Tendai won, I guess. But again, there's a lot of these influences and things that went into these areas, right, and influenced the methods for fighting. And there's a reason why in the Tobacco view there are rules and principles within the philosophy to not be the one who attacks first, right? That is for defensive purposes only when you have no choice, right? That's the psychological warfare and the information gathering and the outmaneuvering and outwitting of the opponent, or to get him to turn on himself, or to introduce a common enemy between him and somebody else that distracts him and moves him away. That allows for the Tobacco ninja to remain invisible, right? To remain undetected, to give no bad guys any reason to come find out where you fucking live, right? So they can decimate your homeland, right? Or your home, your family, or whatever. Right? There's a reason for this, but I can see how in the modern days, where everything's been reduced to the martial aspect, where that's the attractive side, and that's also why I believe that Ninjutsu is just as invisible and as difficult to find in today's world, even though it's supposedly out in the open. That's always been. Okay? So, but anyway, so the first thing he did was he went to Mount Keizan, right? Or the Tendai Tendai school of just general Buddhism. They have everything up there for everything, right? But it's Mikyo and all that. And he kind of went into seclusion and did a whole bunch of soul searching, right? Again, instead of blaming, instead of like this guy didn't fight fair and whatever, right? Didn't blame his teachers. He figured it out, right? Well, he didn't figure it out then, right? What he figured out was this other fighter, right? He's doing stuff that he was absolutely not prepared for, even though he was a master in this fighting system. And so phase 2 was he came down off the mountain and spent about a year. The impression I have is about a year, just going around and observing fights. Again, this was a time when shit was happening all over the place, right? So instead of trying again, instead of looking for a do-over, instead of asking for a rematch or killing a guy in his sleep or whatever, went around watching fights. Right? How are people fighting today? What are the most common attacks? All those kind of things, right? And spent a lot of time with that, right? Taking notes, all that, and then went back to Keizan and spent more time up there developing based on what he already knew and recognizing that he's going to have to loosen up in certain areas. Focused a lot on balance breaking, all kinds of things, right? And I would say that the Gagi Yoshin view was born, but it was developed. How about that? Okay, it was developed as a possibility. Okay? Because what he did after that, he came back down off the mountain and spent about another year going around testing his theories. Right? Back again, where the whole racing for pink slips and all that kind of stuff, right? And that, to me, was the birth of the Gagi Yoshin, right? Where, and this is like the two sides of the mandala for those of you who are in Mikyo and some, right? We've got the intellect and we've got theory and whatnot on one side. We've got these techniques and all that kind of stuff, right? But we've got school of hard knocks on the other side. We've got experiential knowledge, right? Tested, okay? And after that, and actually, like as he was testing it, of course, right, it got more and more refined. At one point, the highest level of balance breaking, right, was being able to surprise someone, right, and be able to take their balance before they realized that it was taken. So it wasn't going to struggle, right? And so when the person realized that their balance was taken, it was so far in the chain of things that when they resisted or tried to counter, they actually the technique backfired on themselves. Okay? In Bujinkan Taijutsu, in the synthesized form, right? This is an important piece that the attacker, their resistance, it doesn't matter if I apply the pressure or they apply resistance, it backfires on them. Always backfires on them. Right? He, again, through all this development and now more and more fight experience, he realized that that was not the top level of proficiency in what he was doing. Right? The highest level of balance breaking is where you surprise even yourself. You break your own balance. That doesn't mean physically or whatever, but if you've ever been doing randori or anything like that, and you did something but didn't purposely initiate it, did something that like took control of things, whether it broke his balance or you got a shot in or whatever, but you surprised yourself, right? That being done consistently, that's the highest level, right? And what that's doing is getting the left brain out of the way, so that you're not thinking step by step through things. You're not trying to follow a plan. You're not even trying to follow the style. You're not worrying about whether or not it's official or not. Okay. Anyway, so again, he traveled, he learned, he adapted, and out of that humility came the birth of the Dai-Shihan, right? High tree, willow heart. Chose that symbol because a willow tree is very, very supple, but it's very very much impervious to storms. I mean, it'll be whipped around all over the place, but because of that suppleness, right? It's got deep roots, but at the same time, right? You understand what a willow tree looks like? It kind of hangs over. It is that adaptability, right? So then that's what allows it to grow much higher, right? And have longer branches and whatnot than something that's more stiff. So these other trees are fine until a big old freaking hurricane or a major storm comes along, and then they just get snapped. Right? Coincidentally, the same principle that's in the Togakure school. Right? Takuma Sensei's poem, Kajiwaku, right? The wildflowers of the meadow. This is about the very same thing, but the Togakure principle is not just for fighting, it is for everything. Okay? Not just to weather the storm or whatever, but to bend when there is wind, to the degree that the wind is blowing, no more, no less, to not bend when there is no wind. So it's different from a willow. Right? A willow is bent regardless. Okay? But either way, right? Strong yet flexible, rooted yet yielding. Okay? Again, like a willow that bends in the storm instead of breaking. Right? So that's the essence of no in the Shi-No-Bi, no, cultivated ability. Right? It's not talent you're born with, right? But what you grow into when you're willing to unlearn, evolve, and begin again. When you're willing to what I call fail forward. Okay? So speaking of the unlearning, right? Some of you guys have gone through the Ninja Mind program that just goes beneath a lot of conventional assumptions, presumptions, knowledge about who we are, what we are, how we work, how the world works, how the connection between the two works, how other that kind of stuff, right? to realign the thinking. Right? It's very much in line with what Daisuke Nishina was taught by Kain Doshi, right? But was self-discovered in a way, right? By Orimoto Takagi. Right? So again, we've done Shi, we've done Noel, right? We'll do another one here for this other syllable, like beat. But before we do that, again, I'll make sure that the link, if anybody's interested in my program, we'll make sure that's in the description as well. Unless James is already dropping these things in the chat, in which case, there you go. But that's not going to help the people that are audio only later, is it? We'll make sure it's in the descriptions. So, James, any questions, comments, complaints? Anybody have information about Takagi that I botched there, that I got wrong?
Well, I don't see anything.
Okay. So, and please note, I don't take any of those things badly. If somebody tells me that I got something wrong or an error, they have a piece of information or whatever, that's a win-win. Okay? Why would I resist getting the story fixed or getting a new layer on top of things or whatever if I'm actually growth-oriented? So anyway, it's only going to make me better. It's going to make my students better. So I'm good. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at a whole different perspective here, right? Because so far we've been talking about people that had status, right? Samurai, had positions of authority and whatnot, right? Not that this third guy didn't have skills and family and clan and all that kind of stuff, right? But we're going to look at the story of outsiders who rose to prominence, right? And that is the Kuki clan. Okay, so the Kuki, right? These guys were sea raiders, aka pirates. Okay, the founders or the people that we now know as the Kuki Shin-Ryu, or on the Takamatsu branch, the Kuki Shin-Den-Ryu. Okay? Yeah, they were outcasts of their time, criminals, right? In a world that worshipped pedigree, name, status, they had none. Okay, but and we have to understand that during this time, right, a long time in Japanese history, right, still a lot of places like this today. There's even this unwritten rule in our own societies. When I say, I'm talking about the West. I don't care if we're talking about UK or US or Australia or whatever, right? There's an unwritten rule in a lot of people's lives. You stay in your goddamn lane. Okay? Who are you to stand out? Who are you to try to be something special? Who are you to try to, climb the ladder or whatever? That's not what we do. Okay? Or it's not what you're supposed to do, being spoken to by somebody else. Okay? This was way worse. But during that time, right? The family or status or situation or whatever that you were born into was it, man. That was your lot in life. Okay. See, that was imposed. That's not the same as me, because I've been there. I've been this guy in my life, where I was taught and or decided for myself that this was my lot in life. The powers that be are holding everybody else like me down. There's no way that I could ever succeed or be successful or step out of my lane or whatever. Right? Okay? That's self-imposed. I may have inherited for somebody else, but I'm not holding on to it. This is not the same as being born into a social or into a society, into a culture. Well, that's the law. Okay? So I get it when people have these self-doubts and inherited or self-determined beliefs or whatever. I get that. But that's a whole lot easier to fix than you will be killed if you step out of your lane. Okay? And in ancient Japan, there were only two ways to increase your status. Okay? And that was either one, you were born into it, okay, and you were promoted up through, right, because of things that you did. Okay, but you still you're in that lane, right? Samurai or monk or farmer or whatever, right? So you could get promotions and higher status within that paradigm, right? But we're talking about going from one paradigm, going from outsider to insider. Okay? The only way to do that was to be given the status, and it could be gifted. Well, it was always going to be gifted, but like you had to do something that was just phenomenal, right? That actually stood out, and that's what happened here. Okay, so also during this time period, right? There was legal kidnapping and legal detention going on. They would never have called it that. However, in ancient Japan, let's say that James was a member of this would have been a rival clan. This would have been a clan that we're going to partner up with, right? We're going to bolster our forces and whatnot, right? But they're not as big as we are, right? So I want the extra people, but I also need to make sure that this group doesn't turn on me, right? And so I do a little shake hand deal. James comes over and everything, and so we form a partnership. Cool, great. And then what I do is I invite James's wife and children, or wife and sister, whatever, right, to be my guest at my castle. Okay, and James can't say no, because if he says no, that breaks the connection, and then we go to war. And since we're bigger than him, we're wrong, right? So for this to be maintained, right, everybody knows what's going on, but the vocabulary and the way things are described doesn't admit to this kind of thing. So his wife and his sister and brother-in-law, or his kids or whatever, are my guests, but they can't leave. Okay? They're my guests until this bond is broken, or until I make a deal with somebody else, and maybe I trust him so well, kind of like Oda Nobunaga trusted Tokugawa so well. Okay, because that didn't start out well either, and it didn't end well. But anyway, maybe there's too little room at the end, and I need to shift somebody else in, whatever, right? But if the bond with me and James breaks, then they get whacked anyway. So it's really screwy kind of thing based on the way we think today. Okay? So this is going on, right? And so this group, right, where wife and family, right, are guests, right, things are about to change significantly. You can look this stuff up, but the conditions and situations are going to change, right? And so a rescue mission was being planned out, okay? And this guy who came to be known as Kukshin, right? And it's because of what they saw, right? But he and a friend decided they were going to mount the rescue on their own, and so they beat the regular troops that were sent to do this rescue. Right? They beat them there, right? And as the story goes, right, when these troops showed up, like this guy became known as Kukshin, had already killed, right, 30, 40 of these guards and samurai that were protecting the grounds and whatnot. And the story that came out of it was that he looked like he was fighting like he had 9 demon gods inside of him. So that's where this thing came from. At least this is a story that I have, right? And so it was this feat, right? And again, what do we say? These pirates beat us to it and accomplished the mission. So I guess they could have killed him in secret, but they didn't. And see, there's a whole bunch of face saving that goes on in stories like this too. Like, I can't tell that they're the ones that actually like saved him, because as soon as they saved the family, they turned them over to the whatever, right? So it wasn't like they kidnapped them as well. So one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, the Kukshin not pirates anymore. They're a samurai family with a pedigree, with papers. History gets doctored a little bit. Okay, interesting. Okay, but the point here was, while the planning was going on, they didn't wait for permission or status or whatever. They just acted. Okay, they have just these 2 guys, right? But directly into danger. It was a win or lose kind of thing, right? If we lose, the family's always, they're still going to be pirates. I'll figure something else out. Okay, but if we win, this changes everything. Okay? And so, as the story goes, fought against impossible odds, completed the rescue before the official samurai forces even arrived. Right? And that single act, born of courage and readiness, changed not just those 2 warriors' destiny, but the destiny of this lineage. That you hear a number of students that are surprised when I tell them that Shi-No-Bi started out as pirates. Okay? But they just didn't get status, because there's lots of samurai families that like we know about them, and we have their scrolls and whatnot, but you buy them at a used bookstore or whatever, because the only way you got them that way was because somebody in the family that inherited them after the clan died out sold them to make money. Okay? They're defunct, right? But the Kukshin became one of Japan's great lineages, right? Now it was actually dying out in the modern era, and there's this big brouhaha between the Takamatsu group and a lot of the Kukshin people, because they were trying to rebuild things, because like nobody knew how to read the old scrolls and all that kind of stuff, and they hired Takamatsu to translate things, and he kind of made 2 sets of books. From his words, as I got him throughout some today, was he watched their instructors teaching the techniques, and they didn't know what they were doing anyway. Like, they did the moves, but they didn't understand the power of it. So when he copied the stuff and translated it, he made one for them that spelled everything out. But the one he made for us had all the sidebar notes and stuff that didn't make it onto their copy. Anyway, all right, so, but either way, right, this story speaks directly to a mindset that I still see today. Right? It's the quiet voice, or sometimes not so quiet, right? I've had people freaking yell at me. They'll either do the thing on the email where everything turns into capital letters, or they'll do it on social media, or they'll do it outright, right? I've got a couple on the podcast. How about it, James? Make a comment or whatever, and I let them win. Because you can't change somebody's mind who believes that they can't do anything, or they choose victimhood over victorhood. I don't mean Victor like my friend Victor. Anyway, so it's that voice that says, I don't have time. I don't have the money. If I had what they had, I could do it too. Right? My wife won't let me. Trust me, I heard that too. Okay. I have no available hours. Whatever. Okay. What it all comes down to is I don't have enough. But the truth is, Hatsumi Sensei said this. He said, Nakama Sensei said this. Every teacher I've had, right? Shrey Sensei, right? His teacher, right? His wife hates and has hated his involvement in Budokan training almost from the beginning. So he actually got involved. If anybody knows Shrey Sensei, he actually got involved because his son wanted to do martial arts, and so Shrey Sensei found this thing, right? And then he liked it, and he got involved. And after he got involved, his son quit. And well, the rest is history with that too. But Shrey Sensei is constantly putting up with the wife not liking how much time he spends training, because it's time away from whatever honey might want done at the moment. Right? So the truth is, no one ever has or had enough. Right? Hatsumi said they didn't. Right? We grew up, not that the family was poor or anything. Dad worked and they made good money and stuff, but Dad was an alcoholic. According to Hatsumi Sensei, he was great when he was sober, but when he was drunk, Hatsumi Sensei was learning stealth movement long before he got involved in Ninjutsu, because he would tiptoe around and try to guide his drunken father, who always came home in a drunken rage, to bed, get him covered up, try to make any noise, because if he woke up or if he couldn't control him, he went after his mom and he went after him. So, not cool shit, right? But post-World War II, right, when he was teaching judo at the time, he had several other Japanese teachers, way to make some money off the occupying forces, right? He was absolutely confused, because what took him and his peers decades to master, he watched these American soldiers, right? Bigger, stronger, just more naturally athletic, picking up the techniques way faster, right, in weeks or months. What took him and his peers years to do, right? And we're throwing him and the other teachers around with ease, simply because they had this natural benefit, right? That experience left him frustrated. It left him confused. It left him the bitter side, right? And left him questioning all of his training, everything he thought he knew about martial arts, right? Why spend all this time? I mean, this master was only going to work on people that were your size, give or take, and the conditions were. But somebody comes in with different assets, and suddenly It's just all for naught. Right? It was that humbling moment that drove him to seek out what he now calls real Buddha, because there was nothing that would have convinced him over all those years. Right? Remember, he picked up his first Boken when he was 5 years old. Right? The best estimate I have, I got different numbers from different people and whatnot, but he had somewhere, if it wasn't dozens, over the equivalent of over 100 black belts in different things, counting each of these things as Menkyo Kaiden, right? Full transmission of lineages. Nobody's ever convinced him that he wasn't doing real Budo, but that's what we're looking for. Okay? Something that transcended size, strength, athleticism, something that could neutralize the other person's or the other army's advantages. Okay? I often share in class this one of the Murphy's laws of combat, right? Which says that if the enemy is in range, so are you. But in Ninjutsu, that's not true. And the way to change that is you use a different weapon system than the enemies use it. And if you're using the same weapon systems or compatible or equal weapon systems, that means if you're fighting like him, then that's absolutely true. But this isn't about doing that. This is about neutralizing his advantage, right? Because if I can't be bigger, stronger, faster, and he owns all that, well, then there's no way to increase my advantage in those areas. So what I have to be able to do is do things in a way that neutralizes his advantage, right? But either way, it was that search that led him to Takuma Sensei, right? And Takuma Sensei himself wasn't born an indestructible master, right? As a child, he was small, he was timid, he was sickly, right? He was bullied so badly. I mean, other kids rode him around the freaking schoolyard, sat on his back, and rode him like a horse, right? Like called him crybaby because he cried the whole time that stuff was happening, right? And Dad was trying to figure out a way to toughen him up, whatever. There was a conversation with his grandfather, right? Kuden Sensei. Kuden Sensei said, "Send him to the dojo. I'll toughen him up." Right? Yeah, he did. Okay. So, begrudgingly, right? He wanted to do this. Like, remember, timid, whatever, not a fighter, right? Except that you're going to be obedient to your. That was a different time too, right? You're going to get beaten if you don't take a beat, right? So, entire first year of his training, every day after school. But there was no school. He still went, right? Weekends, all that kind of stuff. Every day, went to the dojo. And for an hour or more. What I had was hours in my notes. But either way, right? He just got thrown around. He got tripped, thrown, whatnot, to help teach him okay. Right? Of course, in the beginning, throw him, knock him down. Okay? He's crying. Get up. You do it again. Get up. Do it again. Right? But child abuse, Sensei. Yeah, well, I guess we'd all be doing Taekwondo if we all let that kind of shit happen. Right? But through the years of harsh, demanding training, under his grandfather, that fragile boy was burned away. And what ended up in his place was one of the fiercest, but also most compassionate warrior teachers that I think Japan has ever known. Right? Or the name Mongolian Tiger, right? From his time in China, right? Fighting and protecting a Japanese settlement, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, he was also the abbot of a Tendai temple for a while. Right? And then there's me. I wasn't born into privilege or confidence either. I can absolutely relate to Takuma Sensei's story. Beat up in school, right? The punching bag for a stepfather. Right? grew up with abuse, inside and outside of my house. Okay, but that pain, that experience, became my spark. It lit a fire that said, "Never again. I'm going to learn what I need to learn to never ever live in fear, to never be terrorized like that again." Okay? And then also, okay, I wasn't going to stand by helplessly either. So that fire also drove me. It didn't just drive me into the dojo, into one martial art after another, after another, after another, right? But it also drove me into law enforcement, via the military first, but drove me into that, right, to protect others, right? To make sure that people who couldn't protect themselves had somebody standing between them and monsters, I guess. Right? Okay. So when I hear students say, those masters were different, right? I say no, they weren't. Right? That no. Okay? Um, People think it's amazing to me, and I get it, right? One person's challenge that they struggle through to overcome. I get it. Somebody else, same conditions and whatnot. This person will absolutely fall. Go figure, right? But this, let's just end it with they weren't, right? The conditions and the living conditions themselves, right? I mean, most people today, Jesus Christ, right? The poor in our country are 1%ers in 80% in 80% of the countries on the rest of the planet. People don't like to hear that, but they stop scrolling and reading headlines about how terrible their life is, and they can recognize that if they're getting benefits, they were just made wealthy compared to most of the rest of the world that is living in squalor. They would absolutely not make it, or they would do what they need to do to make it if they lived in Japan. I mean, in the mid 70s, I grew up in the mid 70s, right? Believe it or not, only about 70% of households had a refrigerator. Only about 20% had an air conditioner. We didn't. I never grew up with one. Okay. Running water, inside plumbing for toilets, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I go back a couple of centuries. Okay. So again, these past masters, right? They, like everyone else, at the point of defeat, at the point of setback, right? At the point of believing this was their lot in life, or being told this was their lot in life, right? At the point of humiliation, right? Whoever it was, right? Had a decision to make. We all do, right? The movie The Matrix, they call it the red pill, blue pill moment, right? The difference is these past masters decided to not make excuses. No excuses, they're reasons. You can call them whatever you want. You can call dog's tail a leg too, but that doesn't make it a leg. Right? That is the real meaning of B in Shi-No-Bi. Right? Readiness. Okay? When we're called, whatever the problem is, whatever the task is, whatever the issue, whatever the danger, whatever the threat is, right? We're not only equipped to handle it, right? We're prepared, we're equipped, right? And we can handle that particular thing, right? But the question is, when we're called, will we be willing, capable, no, and ready to act, be, right, in a way that moves us forward? It's not about waiting until you have everything. It's about preparing yourself to act, even when you don't have everything. when the time isn't right. It's not the best time. I've never, ever experienced the best time. Again, the truth of it is, the universe doesn't owe you, me, these past masters, it doesn't owe us an opportunity. What it does, because I absolutely believe it is cold and impersonal. It gives you what you want, gives you what you need. If you're tuned in, and tuning in means we pay attention for the moments. We get an opportunity to train, train. Okay. That might mean just a couple of minutes a day, no matter how busy my day is. Something's better than nothing. It still moves me forward. Right? It gives us moments. And some of the best moments aren't pretty, nor are they comfortable. Some of those moments are pretty freaking painful. Right? There's somebody in your life that you think everything is going well, whatever. The next thing you know, they come home like, yeah, sleeping with this other person for a long time. Yeah, I think we're done. Oh, and by the way, you're going to give me a lot of money because I'm going to keep the kids. And the laws are based around that. At least they were during those times. Okay? It's not that these things happen. It's what you do with them. Okay? What you do with them, that's your destiny. And that sets a trajectory. Right? Some of you guys have heard this before, but just catch everybody else up. 2007, September 2007, I was in a really bad traffic accident. Really bad car crash. Person totaled my car. Anyway, found out very quickly that the airbags that are supposed to be protecting us from whiplash, right? Because even if you wear seatbelt, shoulder harness, or whatever, most common injury from a head-on collision is whiplash to your neck. So we'll put airbags in. Sounds good. Yeah. Last sounds I heard as I was blacking out was an explosion. I had to be told later that was the explosive charge that discharges the gas so that the airbag inflates. Well, what happens now is the airbag inflates microseconds before your shoulder harness stops your torso from going forward. So now, instead of getting a whiplash injury in your neck, what you get is two whiplash injuries in your spine. One high and one low. Because the airbag inflates and stops your head from going forward, but because the harness hasn't locked yet, your torso flexes forward. Yes, now I know. Anyway, so I probably should not have kept up with my planned trip to Japan in the spring of 2008 because I had brain damage. I had accident-induced ADD. What that means is that the filter that keeps the short-term memory from being overloaded by all the shit that's happening around you that normally gets filtered out, yeah, that got broken. And they weren't sure how long that was going to be broken. Because I had memory drop off, or I would get overwhelmed, my brain would just go blank. And not Zen blank, blank. Like, I knew who I was, all that kind of stuff. The processing stopped, right? But anyway, I went anyway, because that's what I do, right? And so, but I would hit these moments where, like, the processing would stop, and I would just tell my partner, I apologize, I'm going to have to sit down for a little bit. I need to wait till the system kind of reboots, right, and come back out. And one time this happened, I was at e279 Sensei's dojo, and he kind of looked over and like, okay, and I gave him the story. And, oh, okay, so where's the injury? And I kind of told him about the memory loss. Okay, so but where? And I said, oh, it's in my spine. It's where? And so I told him, right, this one it's the disc at the junction of T8, T9, right, mid thoracic, and like his eyes fucking lit up, like he was absolutely excited, like he was ecstatic about my injury. It was like, that's wonderful. And I just kind of looked at him like he goes, no, you don't understand what kind of a blessing this is. Like, most students cannot feel what you're now able to feel. You should take advantage of this situation, right? May I show you a few things, a few locks, those kind of things, right? This is going to hurt, but I will not hurt you. Do you understand the difference? Yes, sensei. Then he did Musodori, Onikudaki, Omotegyaku, Hongyaku, right? And I'll be damned. Every single one of them locked up my spine at T8, T9. He said, most people have to theorize that, or it has to happen to such a degree they can feel the pressure and they can assume, but because of your injury and your sensitivity, you don't have to train hard, right? You now know that every single one of these, they don't just lock the spine. They lock the spine at a specific place, in a specific region. Can you use that? My eyes lit up. Of course, while simultaneously wincing. But he was absolutely fucking ecstatic. Like, I never saw anybody so happy that other than like an enemy, right? That was there to help me. That was like, you have no idea. This is excellent, right? And so I've used that to tell students, look, you don't stop training when you're injured. This is the perfect opportunity to figure out what you can and cannot do with that type of injury. Most people, what do? They take whatever time off it takes to not feel pain again. And for some of them, they still have to come back to training. Right? What happens if you have a limitation that you can't do anything? Right? There's never a moment where you can't do anything, because only dead people can do nothing. Right? You may not be able to do a lot of things, but how many different levels or aspects of ninjutsu are there? So if you're only in it to be the guy who climbs the castle walls, and I have pictures of me in black belts years ago climbing the abutment walls of Nijo Castle in Kyoto. My wall climbing days are over. My ability to go into a place and assess it for castle security, because Ninjutsu is deep and wide. Right? Unfortunately, as time has gone on, people have been convinced, or they have convinced themselves, that one small aspect. It's important if people are attacking you, you can physically defend yourself. But one small aspect of this entire thing suddenly is the whole thing. So, okay. But Masumi Sensei has the same kind of story. Right? Another one of his setbacks was stomach cancer, intestinal cancer. I had that long before I started training. Wasn't sure he was going to make it. So I gave Menkyo Kaiden to certain of his students. He was already starting to split up. Right? And did a macrobiotic diet and a whole bunch of other stuff. It took him years to recover. Right? But the way he tells it, for years before that, he trained hard body, right? Flexible. It was all about the physical prowess and stuff. And then he got hit with that. he had to rethink the whole survival mechanism. And it was that illness that produced the Bujinkan that we have today. Just self-training and stuff that came out of assholes possibly causing like major legal problems and stuff. I'm talking about more like the Tagagi Ocean Willow thing and all that, because Kotoryu, as he received it, right, I thought a whole camp on the original Kotoryu as it was brought into this stuff before it was influenced by before it was Bujinkan synthesized with Tagagi Ocean and Tagagi Ocean principles and things like that. Very, very hard system. Very like Hulk smash kind of thing, right? But it was that thing, right, that turned him more into these other aspects of adaptability, flexibility, resilience, right, survival, right? Not the in the military we used to call it young, dumb, and full of cum, right? So you die because it's those guys that you put out front and you have them charge the lines because they'll do it. That draws fire and allows us to be able to then figure out how to do a targeted precision injury. Okay. So there's a purpose for everybody. But there you go. Right. So again, I mentioned earlier. I'll get the questions here. I mentioned earlier about the we had done at least one episode on the hero's journey. The scientist, anthropologist, sociologist, a whole bunch of things. Right? His name was Joseph Campbell. You can look this stuff up. He wrote a whole bunch of books on the hero and the warrior ethos, right? From different cultures and these similar principles and concepts and whatnot, right? But he went through these movies and books and historical things, fictional, real life, and all that, and found this pattern in this hero's journey, right? Every myth follows the same rhythm, right? There's a call to greatness, right? Then there's a challenge, and then there's a fall into the abyss, right? There's this collapse, right? And then there's a revelation, there's a journey back, right? And then this hero then is able to pass on the lessons and things, right? But this so-called abyss, right, or this major collapse, right? It's the defeat, it's the failure, it's the exile, right? It's that part again that most people avoid, right? It's the part that actually shuts most people down and makes them quit, right? That it gives them that good old, well, at least I tried story, right? But for the warrior, this is a necessary piece because that call to greatness, right? We have that dream, but then we realize just how fucking difficult it is, how difficult the training is, how much time and effort it's going to take, whatever, right? But then there's this major collapse, right? It's a defining moment, right? That is where the transformation happens. If we stick through it, right? It's in the darkness that Shi-No-Bi, will, skill, and readiness. That's when the magic happens, right? Every founder, every master, every real ninja or warrior, hero from a movie, whatever, that you admire, right? Walk through the same valley, walk through the same thing. The conditions were different. They looked different. The time was different. They walked through the same hell, so to speak, right? The only question is, right, we've all had to answer it. Will you? Will I? Right? That's the easy question to answer, right? Well, of course. That's what I'm here for. Okay? Can you train when you're tired? Will you still train when you're exhausted? Because that's probably when you're going to have to act, right? Or will you train when you're injured? Will you figure out what works, what doesn't, where your true limitations are, whatever, right? You're willing to train when you don't feel like it. You figure out a way to train when honey won't let you. Okay? You figure out a way to train and get this stuff, even if you weren't born rich, nowhere close. Okay? When you're going through a divorce, we're going through a death in the family, right? Whatever it is. Okay? This will and aspiration, the Shi, right, causes capability and new skills, the null, right, to be born, which in turn allows you to be prepared and equipped, right, with the right insights, the right experience, knowledge, whatever, to provide for or attend to be, right, your needs or the needs and or safety of others, whatever the task at hand is. This is Shi-No-Bi. Right? It's the work that produces the Ning, the ability to endure, the ability to persevere, the ability to be patient, the ability to know the difference. Okay. So, anyway, thanks for following me down the rabbit hole. But just kind of close out here a little bit, right? Take a look at a couple of lessons beyond the dojo. So, again, I mentioned this earlier, but when I look at the great masters who came before us, I realize their most powerful lessons weren't just taught in the dojo. They were lived through it. Right? I was taught this in the very beginning, right? But it took me a while to actually understand the lesson. And the lesson was that the teacher is always teaching. This is not like these people that assume a teaching role, and so they say and do all the right things, and they correct you, and they're in charge in the dojo. But outside the dojo, they hate their wife, they hate their life, they hate their job, right? They get drunk and go out with the guys and get themselves in trouble and all that kind of shit, right? There's not saying these people are talking examples of the training. Right? One day I hope to live up to this myself. But the teacher is always teaching, not just on the floor, not just in a dojo, but in everything they do. So, tell you a couple of other ones here. I'll keep this short. Okay. Seno Sensei passed away 2019. All the way up to just before he died. Still came to the dojo. I can't remember if I was there in the spring or the fall, but it was not cold. But he was all bundled up, right? He had multiple layers of clothing under his gi. He had a scarf around his neck. Right? He had a chair off to the side, right? in the kind of the vestibule area. Right? And he still came to class, right? Barely able to move. Yet he was still out on the floor. Like he would be there for months since his teachings, right? His classes. So he would sit and he would take in the lessons. But when everybody was working on things, he would get up off the chair and would wander around and he would help people. Okay? Still teaching, still giving. He's 6 sensei. Right? He's died earlier this year. Right? Most people don't know is that he poured his final energy. He was imperative about getting that Gyoko Yu book done. Right? Before leaving this world. And I believe he did it so that his students would still have his voice, so to speak. they would have these lessons that they needed. All the way up until like he was really, really weak, and then went to the hospital and had that final diagnosis that was going to make it for more than a year. Kept teaching until he couldn't, right? And I was going to say, even now, right? Teach just from a chair, wheelchair, chair at the table at the restaurant, whatever, when students take him out to lunch or for a meal or whatever, right? Sipping tea, whatever. Talking about his body's just not, he's waiting to die. But still very aware, still very conscious and all that, right? So, still teaching lessons. Still sharing insights. Right? Each of these teachers shows us that the art doesn't stop. Even when the body weakens and the literal end is near, they're still doing the do. Right? So, again, just my humble opinion, but I think the true Shi-No-Bi, this will, capability, preparedness, or readiness, or whatever, this continues until the final breath. Right? This isn't something that we do. This is so much a part of who we are that we can't not do it. This is that life purpose. This is that ninja mind. Right? And in this way, it comes full circle back to the nin, right? To the Shi-No-Bi we're used to, that single kanji character that points to these three parts, like almost literally spelled out in the old term, the older definition. Right? They remind us that real mastery isn't about perfect technique. It's about perfect commitment. It's about how you live, how you give, how you face what's coming with calm, courage, and grace. Right? That's why I often refer to Sensei not only as sensei, but as Shi-Sho. Shi-Sho is often translated as master, right? But Shi-Sho means more of a one of the kanji does mean master, but the other one points to somebody who's adept and insightful and whatnot about life, about broader realm, right? Because in Budo, the relationship between teacher and student isn't just instructional; it's transformational. Right? It's a sacred bond that changes who we become. As a matter of fact, in an upcoming Kuden, we're going to go deeper into that. Right? I'm talking about how the teacher-student relationship in Budo differs from like a coach-athlete or a teacher and pupil relationship. Why it's not about learning what to do, but about becoming someone capable of carrying the heart, the core of the art forward. I've said this in the past. Any monkey can learn the techniques. Any monkey can do the techniques. Any monkey can pass on the techniques. But the Densho it pales in comparison to the actual stuff. Right? So, well, I mentioned fall campus coming up this weekend. Hopefully, you're going to make it, even if you just get the videos or whatever. But speaking of this deep relationship, right, at this year's camp, my daughter Trinity, well, you guys know her, will be leading a breakout session called, I think she's titling it The Ideal Mind. Right? And she's drawing from Manaka Sensei's brilliant work, right? It's called Kakusei Mushin, right? It's actually his published thesis on all the work he did. He put himself back to the university so that he could run a lot of this stuff, Mushin, Heijushin, Fulushin, these kind of things, right? Through the scientific process. You try to measure things like Kuji and all that kind of stuff, right? Psychology of the Budo mind, right? And in her breakout session, she's going to explore what it really takes to think and feel and be a warrior, right? And I think a big part, I mean, her big specialization, right, is a master's in like applied psychology and stuff. Is that there's something that he mentions in that book about the difficulty that Westerners can face when trying to really study and get their head wrapped around real Budo. Not just doing it, but living it. Right? Because here in the West, most of us weren't raised in a culture that naturally primes us for this mindset. Right? We have to train it. We have to cultivate the heart and the spirit, and we have to get the lessons that these warrior kids got in childhood. Like she has a list of required reading, required study that our past masters were required to learn, not just in the martial arts, but from culture. Right? We think of, I really want to live during samurai times. Really? She has a list of books that the kids were required to read and study and understand. Okay? Without those things, we might just be guessing. Right? We have to cultivate the heart and spirit that allows us to step fully into that teacher-student bond. Right? And we have to have that, right? To walk that path of transformation that real Budo demands. So she did a really good one last time, but I think her session is going to open a lot of eyes and hopefully hearts to what this art truly is. So again, hope you can make it for camp. I sent out an email and posted a couple of things today. Even if you can't, I did just reopen the doors for if anyone wants to pre-order the videos, right, of all the stuff that's going on. That's available as well. But either way, right? Again, I said it before, I'll say it again. Choice is yours. Okay, so this week, your mission, if you choose to accept it, right? Reflect on your own defeats, right? If you're going through some now, that's an even better place to look, right? Reflect on those moments you wanted to quit, or you thought you didn't have what it takes, or you think you don't have what it takes, or whatever you think the wall is, right? And I'm going to suggest that you ask yourself, what's the lesson hidden in that loss? If we were victorhood minded instead of victimhood minded, if we were solution oriented and not problem oriented, if we were willing to evolve, if we were willing to step out of our well established and well entrenched beliefs about what's true and how bad the world is and all that kind of shit, right? And apply a strategist mindset. Kind of like Daisuke Shi-No bumping into Kaindoshi, right? We're really open to learning a different way of viewing things, right? What new will, what new skill or capabilities, what new level of readiness is being forged right now inside of you, or it's begging to be learned, it's begging to be owned, right? So that you can handle similar situations easier in the future. Remember, this used to be a big part of my emails, and I should probably put it back. Right? Again, this is a synthesis of me going through this process. Right? both on the martial side and the Mikyo side. I absolutely believe this to be true. It is karma in real time. In any given moment, we are either exactly what we choose to be, or we are exactly what we've allowed ourselves to become. And I know shit happens to us, but like in the life purpose discovery process, it's the who we are that decides what we'll do and how we'll handle it, right? And how we'll move forward. That's what I mean by choose to be. Right? We can either recreate ourselves, we can either create ourselves and move through the world, or we can let the world work on us. If anybody can look up the quote, the really famous quote that like my wife has on a poster. Well, I don't think it's a poster. I think it's actually a piece of slate that somebody did up artwork and whatnot. And it's the quote from Rocky Balboa when he was talking to, I think it was his son, about like life will beat you down worse than any opponent. So there's this whole thing. Look it up. It's very, very in line with this stuff, right? So this week, again, reflect on these things, if you want, right? If you want, keep training, keep choosing, keep that inner fire alive, right? Because that Shi-No-Bi, that aspiration, that will, that set of capabilities and skills, right? That readiness, right? That's the true meaning of Shi-No-Bi. That allows the nin, right, to be realized. Right, I'm done. James, any questions or comments pop up along the way before I just wrap this up and call
it? Just one from Dave. He said taking the time off due to injury was a terrible mistake, and actually I believe not continuing to train post my injury has caused a detriment to my recovery in total.
Yeah, but you're fixing it now, right? And if I would have just stopped aging and not let arthritis kick in and all that kind of stuff, I'm half jesting, but what's that old saying? Best time to do whatever you should be doing. I just posted something to promote the school, and has just the kind of the midsection of somebody's body where the black belt is, and it says you could be earning this right now, right? And then the text with the post says, what was the best time to start earning your black belt? A year ago. What's the second best time? Today, right? So, but you can only start with what you have, so here you are. Anybody else? That it?
That was it.
All right. Well, maybe I put everybody to sleep again. Okay. Well, anyway, again, tick, tick, tick. Fall camp is coming up here. Check for the email if you look. We've got live option. We've got virtual. A couple of my guys over the years, since we've been doing the virtual things, was it last year that like Jeffrey Fletcher this year, the security force he works for is so undermanned that he had to get the videos. But I think it was last year, right? He did the virtual thing, right? And he was on Zoom for every class in uniform, learning everything. So I've had folks doing that kind of thing as well because it's the next best thing. Lee Davis has done the same thing on the years he can't come in, he does the virtual thing. So, and if none of that's doable, because you're going to be abducted by aliens for the weekend or whatever, right? Pre-order the videos, and then after everything is over and we get everything, it's just slight editing because you're really getting like mostly raw video of everything, so you don't miss out. It's not just we're not just clipping to the official lessons I give. If we're doing corrections for students, you're overhearing that, or you're seeing things, or whatever. So that, all the breakout sessions, everything. So yeah. So watch out for the emails or whatever if you want those. Otherwise, let's see, what are we doing on Wednesday? Wednesday, for Whiteboard Wednesday, I'm going to be taking a look at this idea of things not working well, right? And having to recover from a mistake, or starting from a really, really, really shitty position. And, I mean, I guess option one is accept defeat, because there's no way to win that. Or, how do you get out of that? Okay. And then that'll lead into techniques for Friday's masterclass. And if you're local with the dojo, I don't think we've been doing 7:30 classes here recently anyway, but once the Shinobi Kai masterclass inner circle stuff is over at 7:30, we've got a 30-minute gap, and then the early Friday Friday night session starts at 8 p.m. So a 2-hour session there. And then for those who are not able to make it in early for that, of course, if you can make it in early, you're more than welcome to train in the other classes. You paid for camp, you might as well just do those too. And then if you can't make it in for Friday night, then 9 a.m. Saturday morning, we hit the ground running, rolling, something like that. I don't know. Don't hit it too hard. All right. So I think that's it. Anything else, James? Anybody pop in with anything?
Just Kyle said thank you.
You are welcome. All right. So with that being said, James, thank you again. I appreciate it. We'll talk to everybody again next time on Kuden.
Get more of Kuden Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at Online Ninja